Okay, good morning. Good morning. We'll call the August 2nd meeting of the California First Responders Network Board to order. First order of business is approval of the minutes from April 17. Are there any corrections?
Yes, sir. There are a couple corrections.
Actually, that should be June 17, not April 17.
That's one of the corrections.
Okay.
Just kidding, of course. I got to find my notes here. I'm sorry. I highlighted them on my copy. Very, very minor, but rather personal. Page 4, where it says Mr. Edison recommended. I would like the I removed from my name, please. I don't get any discount on SoCal Edison. And also on page 6, Mr. Scott Edson said that it's very important to know which sites are supporting FirstNet service. I actually said public safety grade service, not FirstNet service for that line on page 6.
Okay, public safety grade.
That's all, sir. Mr. Chair.
Are there any other corrections? Okay, with those corrections, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Do we have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposed? Motion carried. Do we have to have roll call votes on that, or is that? Okay, I'm sorry, we'll do a roll call vote. Actually, we probably,
And one correction on the minutes, Ferdinand actually was called in on the last meeting. He shows absent. I was just going to make that for the correction on the call-in.
okay, the second correction. So, do we have a roll call sheet?
Maybe just the top of the meeting minutes from last time. You can.
Okay, we'll use the meeting minutes. Okay, so Sheriff Millet? Yes. Barry Frazier?
Yes.
Heather Hostler or Cynthia Gomez? Absent. Kevin Guerrero, Chief?
Here.
Bill Hartley? Here. Chief Scott Howland? Okay, John, okay. Scott Edson?
I'm still here.
Chief Truanich?
Here.
Adeline Zendejas? Did I miss anybody? Oh, I'm sorry, Ferdinand Milanes?
Yeah, I'm here, Pat. If you can give me a minute.
I will, just
Okay.
1 second. And Chief Hunter is also absent. Okay, so we have a quorum. Since I already opened up the discussion about the approval of the minutes, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Oh, we needed to do a roll call vote, right? No, I did the attendance. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. So Sheriff Millet? Barry Frazier?
Yes.
Kevin Guerrero?
Yes.
Bill Hartley? Scott Edson?
Yes.
John Batarsi? Nathan Truanich?
Yes.
I keep butchering your name.
I don't know. I don't know what that was.
We'll have to talk afterwards. You can tell me how to pronounce it. Adelina Zendejas? And Ferdinand Milanes. Okay, we have now to Mr. Milanes. You had an introduction?
Yes, we had a reorganization in Caltrans just recently, July 10th to be specific. So with that, as you know, there was a transportation special session. There was some funds allocated, SB1, for transportation improvement. And with that, Caltrans, at least in the maintenance division, we're setting up a new office that will have oversight statewide of the roadway assets, so that's signals, ramp meters, signs, lighting, associated with SB1. So that office, I will be heading up. Kuwei Lee, who is here, if you could please stand, Kuwei, will take my spot as Chief of Radio Communications in Caltrans. So I just want to say communications has been my life in state service. That's about 32 years. I loved my job. I love comm. I want to thank everyone here in the committee and the board for having me on the board and listening to my concerns. Budge and I have talked quite a bit. So again, thank you. I'm still going to be in maintenance just down the hall. There's going to be a lot of collaboration between this new office and radio communications. We're going to do connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, so that kind of thing. So I look forward to a new challenge and hope you give Kuwait the support you've given me over the years. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your service to this board and to the citizens of California for your participation. It's been very valuable. Next item up on the agenda is the CalFRN FirstNet outreach. We've had an extremely busy month the last 30 days. And to give us an update on that, I'll turn it over to Budge Courier.
All right, so there's a presentation available, and it'll be on the screens as well. And what I'll do is just give a brief overview of what we've been doing for the past, 3 to 4 weeks as we've been up and down California. The intent is to provide a high-level overview of the feedback we received and kind of outline where we're headed next. So I'm getting a bonk there, Paul. There we go. So what I'll be talking about is some of the statistics from the events that we had, the feedback, what we heard, and then some of the results. And those will be reoccurring comments that we heard both through Q&A and through the actual submitted comments that through the feedback mechanism that we had. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. And if you have a question, please feel free to interrupt as we move along, because the intent is to provide a brief back to this board on how the outreach went. So we had 12 outreach meetings throughout the state. There was actually a couple more than that were more informal. There were 12 advertised meetings. We had many more than that. We engaged about 780 plus folks at those meetings. And what we did, I remember when I was here discussing this plan to the board about a month ago, we had a list of priorities in California that we knew from the original outreach we had done. The idea was to refresh those priorities and get feedback. Remember, I provided this kind of bubble chart that clustered those priorities together into 3 groups. So we asked public safety responders throughout the state to help us prioritize these. And then we provided feedback. So what happened at those meetings is we gave a little intro. FirstNet gave a nice background on the FirstNet response that they're providing for California in the selection of AT&T as the vendor. And then AT&T did a kind of a deep dive on the plan, on the proposed plan for California. We went through, the meetings lasted typically about 3 hours. Some were a little shorter. One went a little longer than that. And then after that meeting and during the meeting, we used either a manual feedback form or an online feedback tool to gather comments and surveys. And so what you're going to see in the next few slides is a summary of those results. When all was said and done, nearly 700 comments came back in after we removed duplicates and some of that kind of stuff. And so you're going to see some of that data today. This is what the outreach schedule looked like. We had started, I think, 2 days after the CalFRN board was the first meeting, or it might even have been the next day. That was way back on June 26th, and then we were off and running from there. We had our last outreach meeting on July 27th, which was a tribal outreach meeting, and you can see the schedule on the board there. Some of the statistics to note, this is a graphical representation of where the meetings occurred, and inside those little bubbles, you see how many people actually showed up at those meetings. So you can see there was one in the north, a huge number in the central part of the state, and in the southern part of the state, we had 4 different meetings down there. As far as by the numbers who attended, we had almost 1,000 people register for the meetings. Obviously, plans and schedules changed, but we had 784 actually attend, which is a huge representation. It's certainly large enough to get a statistically valid sample size. For those of you who are engineering geeks like myself, we have some really good data that's statistically valid based on the number of public safety folks we have in the state of California. So what did we hear? Well, one of the big concerns is coverage. As a matter of fact, I think it's something I heard Kevin Ida say multiple times. If you don't have coverage, you don't have adoption. And we heard a similar comments throughout most of the meetings. If you don't have coverage, you can't really subscribe to an AT&T service if you don't have LT&T coverage on your phone. And we've heard that again and again and again. We have lots of data on where the coverage gaps are, and we'll be able to provide that feedback. And obviously, it's the most important thing. If you don't have coverage, your system won't work. And again, over and over, hundreds and hundreds of comments. Cost was another big concern. It should be at or below what they're paying for now for this mobile data service. So again, most of the public safety folks we talk to, right now, they're using some vendor, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, whoever it is, for that mobile data connection back to their CAD and their PSAP. And so FirstNet is primarily focused on replacing that with a public safety broadband priority preemptive service. And so the cost should be at or below where they are today. And we heard that. If they're going to double in price, it's difficult for some of these agencies to make a decision to go in this direction. The other thing we heard a lot about was public safety grade. And it's something that I think is, there's not a clear definition anywhere available in the state portal or at firstnet.com as to what it is. We have a very good sense of what public safety grade means, and we're fairly confident that it's different than commercial grade, which is what is available on today's existing AT&T network. So we're looking for a clear definition of that, what it looks like moving forward, and we heard it again and again. Go ahead, Ferdinand.
Budge and I are on, Budge is the SWIC here, and we're on a joint meeting with SAFECOM, and SAFECOM is working on a definition for public safety grade. So maybe that's another avenue you can maybe reach out. I don't know. I know I'm on the governance that's helping define that. So
we had a meeting yesterday, and they do have a definition. Also, there are several other standards bodies that are working on defining public safety grade, and we know that that Barry participated in a working group he's not able to share the results of, though, that also looked at defining public safety grade. So, like I said, we have a really good sense of what it is. What we don't know is what FirstNet thinks it is. So that would be a really important distinction, and it was a question that came up again and again. So those really are the top three. If we could break it down, and I've got a lot more detail coming up in the next couple of slides on those. Any questions before we move on, or comments?
On the cost one, Mitch was telling me AT&T updated the portal, but when I was on the portal, it had for the first responders two costs, I think, the primary and the extended primary. What about for those who are not, where Caltrans would fall into? I didn't see that in there, so we need to maybe discuss
It's
that.
our understanding that you would fall into the extended primary with the ability, during emergencies to upgrade you to an equal level with public safety, with the first responders, in that the priority and preemption was, or the priority was an additional option for those extended primary users.
All right, so next, other top priorities, access to critical systems. And matter of fact, after one of the first presentations we gave, or the second one, there was a question specifically about CLETs that we were able to go and get clarification on. And so that detail is now available on our website. It's a slide in there, but it's something that if you're going to use this to access your CAD data and other CLETs information across the mobile data connection, then obviously it needs to be certified to transport that data, or we've got a big problem. And so that was something else that was brought up as a critical priority. And also, how is it going to interface with dispatch, 911, records management systems? All that is obviously a top priority as well. And then finally, security is another priority that was in the top 5. from a user perspective, identity and credentialing, there's talk in the portal and on firstnet.com and at the presentations of what this would look like. But I think there's a lot more detail to iron out here and how this will look on a day-to-day basis, but it's a top priority. So again, this was primarily focused on, these pre-formatted priorities that were distributed, and we asked everybody to weigh in on them to see what their priorities were so we could make sure that when we get these comments back, we know which ones are most important. That's kind of the idea of that. So in addition to commenting on the priorities, they also had the ability to provide feedback. So those on this board all have access to the portal. I would say 95% of those that attended the meetings did not have access to the portal. So we created an online feedback tool that allowed anybody, any public safety entity, to provide feedback on what they heard in the meeting, and that's where a majority of the comments came from, to be honest. And it was either a manual fill out of this form before they left, or they went online and took half an hour to an hour to fill out that feedback form, and then we consolidated all those comments. We also had a very aggressive callback program in place. When you attended a meeting and you didn't fill out a form, we contacted you via email multiple times and then via phone multiple times. And that helped drive the numbers up too, especially toward the end. So certainly appreciate Dell's effort on that regard. So many of you in this room might have got a phone call from him at some point if you did not fill out your feedback form. So that really helped drive the numbers up. So what we saw, of those 700 plus folks that attended, we actually received back 228 feedback forms, which is a really high number. If you've done any type of survey analysis, this number is very impressive. We broke them down when they fill out their form, they could self-select what agency they reported from. So public safety communications is kind of a broad term that would incorporate probably everyone from IT, someone doing radio system management, probably comm center managers might fall into that, self-select into that category as well. And maybe even some law enforcement and fire folks and EMS and others might self-select that category. Within that, you can see law enforcement had a number that responded, and then fire, emergency management, other, and then EMS, and on down from there, the numbers get a little smaller. So this is what, by discipline, what the feedback forms look like. And again, those forms, 228 were received. Some of them had 3, 4, 5, 10 comments each. So that's how we got the numbers of the total number of comments received back, if you're wondering how that math works out. So they were able to comment on topics that they heard during the meetings, or they heard through any other source, or that they went out to firstnet.com and actually read through it. And some we found were even going to our previous meeting Q&A sessions, and we actually had the presentations up online, and they were commenting on that. So anywhere they could get data, they were providing feedback on, and we were able to capture all that. They also, again, these 22 priorities that were on this bubble chart, they were able to select which of those was their top 3. So we could get a sense when we got all this feedback, back to us, we wanted to be able to parse it out and figure out what's most important. So we have that data captured as well. And we also learned that there was definitely an interest in early builder integration. As a matter of fact, I think LA Rick's area submitted 130 comments by themselves, so good on them. So there was definitely some interest from early builders. Yeah, and those are not duplicate comments. Don't think that that's the same comment 130 times. That's 130 distinct comments. And for the AT&T and FirstNet folks, you'll get to read those when we send them in at the end of the week. So this is just a sample of what we'll be sending back to FirstNet. They provided to us a pre-formatted way that they want the data. So we on our side have a way to parse this out, sort through it, drill down in, figure out trends, do trend analysis. All that is built into it. But in the form that AT&T required, they just wanted it in this format. So that's what we'll be providing to them. So really a big thank you to everyone who's listening who provided feedback, and then also to just let you know your name and agency information is not being submitted to FirstNet. So you don't have to worry, that data is not going, just what the fields that you see here. And really the goal was to align it to the state plan that was delivered to us and provide the feedbacks in that area so that FirstNet and AT&T could respond to them. All right, so any questions on that? Because I'm going to go into a couple more statistics before we... All right, so this slide here, this graphic is meant to represent, of these priorities, and people went into their form to fill them out, which ones are the most important. And you can see coverage and capacity, 53% of the people said that that was the most important factor. So I think that's an important takeaway. Cost is next, early builder, cybersecurity. So those are those top 5 that I listed and already walked through, and then you can see where the rest of these fell out in the priority levels. So this will help us to understand, you know, what definitely needs to be addressed in order to see success, is how you can process this data. Some of the comments that we heard, reoccurring themes throughout, to the tune of hundreds of comments on some of these. Coverage is poor in some areas. I mean, that was, you can look at a coverage map and see that. And there are other carriers who have better coverage. We heard a lot of discussion on that. The coverage detail that's provided in FirstNet.com is not enough to really make a decision. It has to do with the dB level of the coverage that's portrayed, the size of the tile that depicts the coverage in that area, and the granularity and ability to separate out the layers. All that's kind of missing today. There are some other tools we have in California, the broadband coverage map that's available through the Public Utilities Commission that folks have access to that have a lot of that granularity, and so they're used to that. And that detail is just simply not provided in the tool. For an agency to make a decision, they either have to have personal knowledge of what the coverage is in their area or go do a drive test themselves, because the data that's available in the marketing or, you know, FirstNet.com or the portal just isn't enough to make a decision. In-building coverage was discussed again and again as being important. Obviously, rural coverage is a priority. It was something that, when FirstNet was discussed a decade ago, was the focus, and it remains important, and we got a ton of comments on that. Many entities expressed an interest in working with AT&T for co-location. In other words, they know they have coverage gaps in their area. They have towers and sites and locations that they'd like to enter into agreements with. We've heard a commitment that there's a willingness to do that, but the exact details, we don't know what that looks like, so that would be something important to learn about. We also heard some interference concerns, obviously with this being in the 700 meg band 14. We have public safety LMR that is also in 700 meg. And so, you know, intermod studies, making sure that interference has been addressed. We've heard it said, but when you go to the portal, how that's going to look on a day-to-day basis, we're not sure. Even maybe down to the detail of when you install an antenna on your fire apparatus or on your police vehicle, how are you going to deconflict it with the other antennas you've already got there, and desensing and all that other stuff. There's a lot of things that relate to these interference concerns. All right, so any questions on coverage before we go on? See, look at that, Scott. No questions on coverage. How about that?
Hey, Budge, let me interject something here. I just received a message from our main office over there, and if there's anybody who's got a brown Chevy Silverado, license number 8M08483, or a gray silver Toyota Camry, license number 6JVD778, is parked in front of the 601 building, you're encouraged to move it because it's right next to the police property, and they're going to be painting. They had a fire here last week, and they're going to be painting right next to it. So if you don't want if your car's over there and you don't want to cover it with white paint, you probably want to move it. With that,
unless you want a white car, leave it. It's just a bonus. All right, thanks, Pat. Okay, so the next major area that we received, again, this is in the comments, both the Q&A and the information received in the feedback tool, was cost. There's just not enough detail in there to really make a decision. Some said the cost is too high. There was a lot of discussion about the need to have this on state contracts, and we know that there's a move in that direction. Obviously, it depends on opt-in, opt-out. But that was a definite need, and just the complexity of the plan. You know, if you were trying to make a decision, you almost need like a slide rule to figure out what it is you're going to do with your type of plan. The other thing we noted in the portal is that unlimited is not necessarily unlimited. If you go over a certain metric many months in a row, then there's a different tier level that you're now encouraged to go into a pool plan. So is unlimited or not? That's another comment that we heard on the cost. The devices, and we had many questions, both Q&A and through the feedback form about, am I required to buy an AT&T device? And how would this interoperability look with existing devices they have today and apps? And these were answered in the Q&As, and they're available on our website, but most of this is still under development, so the details of it is not readily available. But when the state plan comes back, we would hope some of these things would be outlined a little further, if not in detail of what it would look like, at least a plan on how to address it would be very helpful. Because we got a number of questions about what do I do with my existing device? How do I incorporate Band 14? When will those Band 14 chipset devices be available, fully integrated into smartphones and that kind of stuff? And so just any level of clarity that could be provided, and then is there going to be anything included to help agencies migrate, with respect to costs and the effort included, even to the degree of the IT support that might be required for some of those smaller agencies that don't have a real robust IT, in-house solution. That's something that we heard a lot about. This is obviously a very technical network, and if you don't have a real robust IT or radio shop, there might be some gaps there. So just how do we fill those gaps in? What does that look like? What's available through the offering? That was a big concern we heard. So where we're at right now, what we've done is we've taken every comment that was received through the state portal. We've taken everything that the members of this review committee and the technical advisory group submitted to us. We were able to reach out to the SAIC subject matter experts in their review of the plan. And then, of course, the feedback forms that were received online and the hard copies that were handed in at each of the meetings. And we got anywhere from 5 to 10 at each meeting in a hard copy. All that data has been consolidated, and we have a data analysis tool that we're able to parse all this information out to align with priorities and to align with which portion of the state plan it applies to. It's all there. We received an additional 30 comments based on the tribal outreach meeting that we had last week and a few other straggling comments. All of that will be consolidated, and it will be vetted through this board and then up to Cal OES, and it'll be delivered as promised and required to AT&T and FirstNet via the tool that they've requested on Friday by 5 p.m. I would not expect it would be much sooner than Friday at 5 p.m. because of the work we have yet to do to get that data to you. So that's really where we're at with the feedback, and with that, we'll see if anybody has any questions or comments. Kim.
Last week, I had a chance to meet with the International Fire Chiefs communication folks and FirstNet staff, where we had additional conversations out there. I thought some of the interesting parts we talked about was on the volunteer side, because volunteer firefighters, and I would assume even our law enforcement colleagues and their SAR side of the house have a number of volunteers who may not end up with any department-owned devices, and they're working through the process by which those agencies would be able to identify those volunteers and those devices to actually have them be able to be on FirstNet capo out there. we had a very good, long, lengthy conversation about making sure that a conversation with AT&T, who's also in the room, was to maybe also, as we migrate and start looking towards Band 14, would be to also set up a program much like we did a couple years back when we upgraded to 6s and 7 iPhones. So there was a trade-in on some of those to help also get to that next level, is one of the conversations we entered into. We had a further conversation about the need to really work with AT&T and FirstNet just on CAD capability and the need to be able to share and pass data and work back towards maybe not working with some of those vendors to make sure that some of what they have is not totally proprietary, so we would be able to utilize it in other areas out there. So a lot of really good conversations in there that I thought continued on from some of our conversations we've had here in California.
Thanks, Chief. Any other comments from the board?
Thanks, Barry Frazier. I just wanted to ask quickly about comments on end-user training or customer service, those types of comments. I know that they probably aren't the highest priority, but they're actually going to be very important. And I want to make sure that we did get some comments requesting training, not only for end users, but also for our techs who install these devices, mobile devices in vehicles and that type of thing, and the importance of customer service and providing a seamless way to resolve problems once the system gets up and running. So I just wanted to ask Budget, did we get comments related to those types of issues?
Michael Boyden from SAIC, maybe you can you step up and grab the mic?
Thank you.
I'll let Budge comment, but yes, we did. I know, for example, I put in a comment for training with a whole list of areas that need to be included, and particularly all the way down to the customer service aspect. It just amazed me with the hundreds and hundreds of comments how thorough the folks were. So they are indeed covered in the comments.
Thank you. Mitch?
I just wanted to publicly thank you for the outreach and the efforts that were involved. Exceptional work all the way around to try to get us the best data possible for input to the state plan. So well done.
Thank you. Any other comments from any of the board members? Okay, we'll close that discussion. Next item up is a FirstNet AT&T update. So Kevin Nida and Scott Andrews.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, and distinguished guests, my name is Kevin Nida, and I'm the FirstNet Regional Lead to California. On June 26, 2017, Cal OES, FirstNet, and AT&T embarked on a 12-meeting mission arranged by Cal OES and concluded this week. This was an aggressive schedule to listen to California first responders and relay their needs to FirstNet by Cal OES. I'd really like to acknowledge and appreciate the courtesy and support of your staff, Pat. They really did a great job in a short notice and always very, very helpful. So I want to make sure we acknowledge them. You know, the main lessons learned we'll repeat. We get it that California's main priorities are coverage, cost, more deployables, and specific information on site resiliency. In addition, network security and the 911 PSAP integration. So looking forward to getting those. And, listening to first responders resulted in many questions, as we saw. I think you got the result that you needed. And we at FirstNet are looking forward to the consultation information received by the state by this Friday. So thank you again for your support and the information that's forthcoming.
And we trust that all the coverage needs that are articulated, all the
well, we joke that
the
top
hardening is going to be resolved in the final plan.
Pat, we joke that the top three priorities were coverage, coverage, and coverage, but I didn't want it to be too redundant. So, but we hear that
resiliency and cost and everything else that goes along with it. Okay. Scott.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the FirstNet lead for AT&T here in California, Scott Andrews. As many of you know, I came out of public safety, so I really look to myself as kind of a conduit for you to really make sure we get the best public safety system in place here as delivered by FirstNet and AT&T. So To echo the comments already made here today, I'd really like to thank OES. Bud, you put together an extremely aggressive schedule based on the time frame we had to work with. I think the numbers we figured out was over 2,000 miles we traveled without leaving the state of California. So that's pretty extensive. It's a big place. Obviously, the results speak for themselves. The Rancho Cucamonga meeting alone, we had 139 people, and I think that almost seems low because the room seemed more full than that. But we had great dialogue. We received great feedback. We were able, as AT&T, to talk about many of the key offerings and the key primary parts of FirstNet. QPP, local control, resiliency, coverage, cost, devices, app ecosystem. We spent roughly an hour or so on our part of the presentation at each one of these outreach meetings with a lot of Q&A. It was meant to be conversational, and I think it was. I really want to thank our stakeholders for participating and really being engaged in these meetings. It wasn't a lecture situation. I don't think we had a single meeting where we just spoke and it was a quiet room. We had a lot of dialogue, a lot of feedback. SAIC did a great job capturing those questions. I know we've received a lot of those. We're working through those answers. We're looking forward to get the official feedback through the FirstNet portal, so we can dive into that deeper and provide those deeper answers that are necessary that Budge outlined. AT&T sees this as a partnership. This isn't a we build it and we hope you come. This absolutely is a partnership with public safety and OES. We understand that opt-in is not success, adoption is success. The only way we're going to get adoption is to build a network that meets the needs of public safety. If we don't do this, this is all for naught. We have a chance to really make a huge difference. It's really a game changer for public safety. We understand that, but we have to step up and deliver the system public safety needs. So with that, again, I'd like to thank everybody for your support, the participation, the ability for these outreach meetings. I think that was exactly what we needed. It was a lot of work, but now you have that data you needed to go forward to qualify the offer and make the next 45 days very beneficial for us all. So with that, thank you.
I think we have a question online from Cynthia Gomez. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning. First, I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done, particularly holding the tribal consultation session. I'm sorry, but I'm hearing myself talk back to me. One of the questions that I had, though, is I was wondering whether or not there was any discussion about whether or not tribal police departments would have access to the CLET system.
FirstNet, do you have an answer to that?
My understanding is that that's a DOJ, that'd be a California DOJ question, and whoever has CLET's access now would have CLETs through the FirstNet network, but there are specific requirements for those agents to be able to be used or using the CLET's network. So basically no change if they already have it.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Okay, so there hasn't been any discussion about expanding that. That would have to go directly with DOJ, right?
Yeah, my understanding that is a DOJ responsibility to certify those agencies.
Okay, I was just wondering if there had been any discussion with them.
Cal OES has not engaged in any discussions with DOJ regarding that. We certainly can.
Okay.
Kim Zagaris, actually, I think between Chief Pazin and the Department of Justice and state sheriffs and state police chiefs, it's probably a conversation that they need to coordinate. Again, Kevin's actually on target. Those who currently have access would have it, and there is parameters in which they allow people on if you meet those criterias currently. So all that can be reviewed and followed back up on through OES law and Department of Justice.
Thank you, Chief. Mitch, did you?
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, let's move on. Next item up is the State Plan Advisory Committee. Barry?
Thank you, Pat. This is Barry Frazier. Just a real quick update. The State Plan Advisory Committee more or less coordinated the review teams and an expanded group, actually, of reviewers who were given access to the portal, the non-public portion of the AT&T FirstNet plan. We held a couple of conference calls. We encouraged our reviewers to submit comments, and I think we did receive a lot of very good comments from the review teams. We're also lining up those teams for the next phase of this, which we know is coming, which is when we will get the final plan back. We want to have our teams up, ready, prepared to review the final plan, to provide a recommendation back to the CalFRN board as to how well and to what extent FirstNet and AT&T have responded to the comments that we provided. We've tried to get our teams to pencil in some time toward the end of September, mid to end of September, because we're guessing that's about the time that the final plans will come back out. We need to hit the ground running, review the final plans quickly, and be prepared to give recommendations back to the board probably at our October meeting. So that's what we've been up to for the past month, and we're again getting prepared for the follow-up final plan review.
Okay, any questions for Barry on the state plan process? Okay, you're also up on the PSAC update.
All right, I just have a very brief update from the Public Safety Advisory Committee. I don't believe we've had a meeting since our last meeting when I provided my last update. And by the way, this is not an action item on the agenda. This is just an information-only item. I wanted to make that clear. The one thing I will mention about the PSAC is that the PSAC has a task team that is developing, preparing for adoption materials specifically targeted for local public safety agencies. I received those materials yesterday, and it's unclear to me at this point whether they're actually public documents yet or not, so I'm not able to distribute them. They will become public documents, and I think they will be very valuable for local agencies because they include, among other things, a checklist for local agencies to begin to review and prepare for making their decision as to whether or not to adopt FirstNet. These obviously are developed for a nationwide audience, but I think there'll be some value in them. And so as soon as I get the okay to provide those, I will send them to Cal OES staff to distribute to the board. And that's really the only update I have on the PSAC.
Okay, are there any questions from the board for Barry on the PSAC? Okay, the next item up is the statewide interoperability coordinator, Budge.
So the statewide, as the SWIC, I coordinate the statewide interoperability executive council. There's 4 planning areas there that meet quarterly. They were the group that we leveraged heavily to get the outcomes that you saw at these meetings. So they were actively involved in each of these meetings. One of the things that we heard again and again is there's a need to develop a governance structure. So there's a local control tool. The complete functionality of that tool is yet to be disclosed, but we know some of what it will offer. But it stops short of kind of statewide collaboration and governance that's needed to deconflict priorities for adjacent agencies and jurisdictions. And so that's a role that we see someone needs to fill. We already provide that same type of interface for the interoperability channels statewide. So we see a good fit between, what the CalSeek is doing now and the needs going forward. There's also a need, there's a requirement that comes out from the National Council of SWICs through the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Emergency Communications, a lot of acronyms. And we have a statewide communications interoperability plan, and in there you have to define public safety broadband rules of use and procedures and all that. So that document is due for a refresh next year, and so we're going to start putting together some best practices and meeting with the various groups throughout the states to figure out what that local control looks like with respect to FirstNet. And we'll come back to this board with recommendations on what we think those best practices are from a governance perspective. And so we see that as an ongoing role. There were a lot of questions related to that. And as I interact with these various planning areas, that's what they're wondering. How do we coordinate this on a statewide level, especially for large responses that, cross multiple jurisdictional boundaries? So I see that as something that we're going to begin working on now, and we'll be interested to see what tools are available to us through that local control interface to really see what we have the ability to coordinate. So we're looking forward to that. Any other questions for me related to that?
Any questions from the board? Thank you, Budge. Okay, next item up is public comments. Do we have any public comment forms? Hearing none. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Is any
Aye.
opposed? Motion is,
Aye.
meeting is adjourned. I'm sorry, Cynthia? Okay,
Yes, aye.
thank you.